Hey, how's it going, everybody? Hopefully, everyone's having a good Sunday after or Saturday afternoon. It's Saturday. Um, okay, so I spent a little bit of time trying to figure out the audio and music. So if I could get a mic check and if you guys could let me know that the sound for the music is playing okay. I can't connect my headphones to my computer plus the audio. So it's kind of one or the other. It's showing that it's playing, but I would be very thankful if you guys could do me the biggest of favors and kind of just tell me how the audio sounds. Am I too loud? Is the music too loud? And I can kind of adjust from there before we get started. So that would be wonderful if you guys could let me know. Everything sounds good on my end. Okay, thank you, Caesar. I appreciate you letting me know. We'll go ahead and let people kind of just find their way in here first before we go ahead and get started. Only got a couple of people in here right now. David said it sounds good. Okay, cool. And the music is coming through for you guys. I just have like a half a dozen songs of things that I've downloaded that aren't going to get me flagged. So they're just going to be playing in the background, and hopefully they're not too crazy or loud or anything like that. So just let me know. Hey, what's up, Timon? Sounds good to me. Okay, cool. I am glad to hear that. Yeah, like I said, we're going to go ahead and let people kind of just find their way in here for a little bit. So I think before we get started with the actual work in progress stuff, what we will do is we'll just probably sculpt for a little bit, you know, kind of hang out, let people find their way in here, you know, chat and see what we can accomplish on this Saturday. I don't know why I keep calling it Sunday. I'm used to streaming on Sundays, so I'm gonna probably keep saying that. So let's go ahead and get some ZBrush open for a little bit. How's everyone's Saturday going? Anyone got anything eventful going on? Anything interesting? Or not? Maybe just relaxing. That's always nice too. Excited for the stream, doing some Saturday night sculpting myself as well. Awesome, Matt. What are you working on? Hopefully something cool. I'm sure that you've told me in the past, but you know, you're gonna have to remind me. Let's see. Let's get this guy in here. Okay, cool. So if you were around on Thursday, we were sculpting this guy for a little bit. This was a piece that I started like last week, so we spent a little bit of time refining the leg, getting some of these forms in place and stuff like that. So I'll probably just sculpt on this guy for a little bit, and then once we get some more people in here, we'll get things started. But for anyone who wasn't aware, this is a work in progress stream. That's going to be the main focus of what we're doing. So if you are interested in getting your stuff potentially looked at, again, we'll see how many I get through. But if you're interested in getting your stuff looked at, there is a link to the Discord in the description here where you can join from, and there is also in the chat there is a section called work in progress images to drop. So there's like 14 submissions in there or something like that. So I doubt we're gonna get through everything, but we'll try and make it through a couple, see what we can do. No pressure on when we have to be done tonight, so that is the nice thing. But until then, until we get started, we'll just go ahead and kind of sculpt away. And again, the nice thing is since the music is finally working, I don't have to blab and talk for the entirety of the 2 hours. So that's going to help me to save my voice a little bit. Plus I have a couple of drinks, so that'll make things a little bit easier too. So at this point, this is all still pretty early block-in for a lot of this stuff, just kind of figuring out the forms and things like that. There's still a long ways to go, but just trying to fill in some of the void of some of this information that is kind of there in the drawing, but not quite fully there. Like this area is kind of covered in the concept by that front leg, so we don't have a ton of the information on what this area is going to quite look like, and you know what some of this stuff is doing. But I have a pretty good idea, pretty good flow of kind of how things are panning out right now. We spent a good amount of time on Thursday on the leg, and I feel like I was able to kind of get that situated pretty quickly, which was nice. I feel like over the last couple of years, my speed has finally started to improve, and I feel like this was an example of feeling a little bit more confident in my speed with this piece so far. I'm sure that it's still going to end up taking me a ton of time to get everything up to the point that I'm happy with it, but even for just kind of a block out, I feel like it already has a pretty good kind of shape going on, and a lot of the forms are already starting to look okay. So it's a fun little piece. Got some really cool, interesting forms to work on and to sculpt, so figured it would be a fun one to work on for a little bit. Hey, what's up, Alex? How's it going, man? The update that you've been working on for the hair, it's looking cool, man. I was gonna start off with that one for the review. I don't have a ton of notes on it, but overall I definitely like the update and the progress, and I think that like second attempt at it, you're doing a really good job of improving from the first one that you did. So really cool to see, man. Doing really nice with that. So one thing that you'll always notice with the characters that I sculpt, and I'm curious if any of you guys do this, I always have a tendency of starting like from the bottom and going to the top. I always feel like I kind of start with like the least important stuff first. So anytime I go and like watch my sculpting videos back, I'm like, this is honestly kind of a little bit boring because I'm sculpting the stuff that isn't super exciting first. So I'm curious if you guys also, how you guys approach that stuff. Do you guys like to knock out the head first, or what do you guys like to work on first? This area needs to be a little bit thinner. Heck yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, totally, dude. Like I said, I really like the direction that it's headed. I think like the look of it and stuff is already looking really awesome. This is the first time I've joined the stream. Do you mind showing the concept you are going off of for this sculpt? Yes. So this is the concept. It's from Jamin Kim. I think that's how you pronounce his name. But he also did a concept for this, and so these are a couple of sculpts based on some work that he's done, as well as this is the original concept. So that's kind of what I'm doing for this stream. Oops, didn't mean to minimize that. But yeah, that's kind of what we're going to work on for a little bit. We got like 17 people in here, so we'll maybe sculpt for a little bit longer. Just kind of see if we can get that number up first to give everyone time to get in here and join and hang out if they so choose. And then if not, obviously this will be a video on the channel for people to check out. This one will be just open access on the live section for rewatching. So if it's late for some of you guys, feel free to hang out as little or as long as you want. Obviously, the longer you hang out, I always appreciate it, but I understand that there are a lot of people that are in different time zones than me, and so it's a little bit later, a little bit earlier, or whatever. So, you know, I always appreciate you guys coming and hanging out when you do. Same for me. I treat the unimportant parts like the practice piece. Yeah, that's kind of how it is for me. I feel like I kind of get my footing with the piece, you know, blocking things out and stuff. Like with this one, if you look, like the head was just kind of the main mass. I didn't really figure too much out about it, and I kind of like pulled out the tail and the legs and got an overall general shape. So like this one isn't that far back, but like after the first session, I think I sculpted for probably like 20 minutes or so. This is what it looked like after the first session. So just getting that initial block out in. And then I was like, okay, well, like I kind of like some of the forms going on in the abdomen and the chest area. So that's been kind of like where I've primarily refined stuff. And then the tail, like figuring out how some of these like forms are working together, and like some of the musculature that's in there. Oops. I hate it when this happens. Where is my Wacom driver? Okay, there we go. I feel like I always have that happen too when it comes to ZBrush. I have the drivers disassociate, and then I spend half of my time just reopening up the drivers to get things to work. So we'll get this kind of form in here. So we got a couple of muscles in there that kind of feel like they're going to support this big old tail thing that he has. And I probably need to get a little bit sharper taper on here. Sick, it's looking wicked, man. Thank you, I appreciate that. Always nice to know that it doesn't look like poo-poo caca, you know? Because sometimes that's what it feels like. But so far, I feel pretty okay about this piece. Which that is growth, because, you know, most of the time when I make art, I feel like it looked sucky for a very, very long time. Took me a long time to get past that valley of things looking like crap. But here we are, 13, 14 years later doing this. I finally feel like I'm past that point to some extent. But yeah, how is everyone's Saturday going? I had a mentor session this morning, so I did that for a little bit. Took my dog for a long walk. It's pretty hot at my house this week, so we went for a little walk, but it was kind of miserably hot, which was unfortunate. We did that, and then I actually went to a card show up in Anaheim too, which it's just me by myself this week. My wife is out of town, but I went to a card show, and you know, I thought it was hot walking the dog. It was probably hotter in that card show than it was outside walking. It was just a bunch of sweaty men all just selling Pokemon and sports cards. So it wasn't as exciting as I was hoping it was going to be. It was a little bit more crowded, and I probably should have gone a little bit earlier, and I didn't really end up finding too much that I actually cared about. So it was unfortunate, but it was a good experience. I just know for next time not to go to that one. And also the people kind of sucked there, so that was unfortunate. Usually when I go to those things, I like look for the things that I want, but then also I am looking for people that are nice and people that talk to me. I did run into a guy that I was wearing my shirt from work, and some guy was like, "Oh, nice shirt, you know, like, are you a developer there?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I am." And he was like, "Oh, that's awesome. I actually work at Blizzard." So I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool," you know, kind of running into people in the industry. He was a vendor there too. I was like, what's got you into vending cards on the weekends? And he was like, "Oh, you know, I just really enjoy doing it." I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty cool, you know, cool little side hobby." He said he used to work at Riot too, so that was cool little experience, you know. Fun fact about Riot: when I was in Japan at the beginning of the year, I did this food and wine tour thing with like me and my friends and my wife and stuff, and we were in Tokyo, and we did this during the food and wine tour. It was like a group of probably like 10 or 12 of us. There was a handful of people that we didn't know, And there was these two girls that were there, and they were like, oh, hey, you know, our names are such and such. And they were like talking to me and my wife, and, you know, they were like, oh, where are you guys from? And we were telling them that we live in California, and they're like, oh, so do we. And one of the girls was like asking what we do, and or I asked her what she did or something like that. And she was like, oh, I actually work at Riot as a producer. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And so small world, running into people that I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm probably like 1 to 2 people removed from actually knowing who you are. So always a fun little experience to run into people that you might have a connection with somewhere down the line or somehow. What's your timeline on when you would like to get this piece done? Honestly, I usually don't have too much of a timeline for personal work. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the time frame that it takes me to usually finish something, it's pretty sporadic. I think the other day on stream, I don't remember what piece it was. I think it was the Neomorph piece that I did. We were talking about that, and I don't remember if someone asked about it or I just like brought it up, but I brought up the first sculpt that I did on it. So usually when I work, I like save versions of it for a couple of reasons, obviously for like revision history, but also for the ability to like look back and kind of see, you know, making sure that I'm making some kind of improvement, as well as like, you know, down the road I can show that off on like social media or whatever and just kind of like show it as a breakdown. I always find that to be interesting to show to people. You know, I like to see the progress and show the progress, and I think people like that. But the first save of that file was in 2020, and I probably didn't like finish that character until like 2023 maybe, I think was when I finally finished it. So usually when I start projects for personal work, I don't put a deadline on it because I just kind of come to it and finish it when I get a chance. This one, I feel like I'm moving pretty fast on it, so I wouldn't be surprised if I like finished the model on this guy relatively quickly, and the texturing isn't too complicated. So I will probably most likely, again, I'm not committing to this, so don't get that confused, but probably by the end of the year I'll have this guy finished. I have a couple of other pieces that I need to finish up, and I have other pieces that I've started that I haven't finished, and so I have a lot of stuff that's in the works, or stuff that I've started, stuff that I need to go back to. I still need to finish that Bayonet piece that demonic Pokemon Bayonet that I did a while back, like last year. I still need to texture that guy. So let's see. Quick question for AAA game portfolios. Is ArtStation page enough, or would you recommend a show reel? Also, should wireframes, UVs be shown, or a strong final and clay ZBrush render fine? So for the first question, yeah, ArtStation is enough. I only have an ArtStation. I don't host my stuff anywhere else. I still think ArtStation is the best place to do it because it, you know, you make things concise. Show reels aren't really a thing in games, at least. I don't know about VFX if that's still something that they like to see, but kind of doesn't really seem to serve too much of a purpose in my opinion. But for games, yeah, no one shows a show reel. I have never seen anyone submit a show reel for games, at least. Not saying you can't put that stuff up on your portfolio, like on YouTube or whatever, but like that's not what I would submit. I would submit an ArtStation, because with ArtStation, that's where recruiters are going to look, and that recruiters are used to the format of it. They know how to kind of navigate it. It's easy to make it simple and easy to find pieces and things like that. So I would stick to ArtStation, and for presenting your stuff, wireframes and UVs is good to show. Don't just show a clay ZBrush render. I can tell you that if someone submits a portfolio piece and the piece is anything less than stellar, I'm gonna just kind of click off of it if it's in a ZBrush render. I think just showing ZBrush renders is like very low effort and kind of just shows that you didn't take the piece to like a finished state. So and that being said, you can obviously be a great sculptor, and so like you really have to like wow me over with your sculpts, but most people probably aren't doing that. And so I think just a little bit of extra presentation is going to go a long way for your renders. So I recommend always doing some kind of presentation, because I think that just, it shows that you care about your work. It shows that it's important, and that you wanted to put the time and the effort into it. Like this piece, for example, if you were just to like render this out, okay, like this is obviously a great looking model. This is a ZBrush render. I can get behind because it looks good and it's solid, but this is a ZBrush render, but there's poly paint on it, and there's a little bit more effort and presentation to it. So I recommend always doing that. I usually recommend just like getting some kind of light and render on your image if you can, whether it be in like Marmoset, Arnold, whatever it is usually the best in my opinion. I don't know how other people necessarily feel about it, but that's how I feel about it. And, again, take that as you will. I am not the speaker of finality and truth in any capacity. So that's just my opinion, though. But I do think that there's definitely some people that probably share that same sentiment. Okay, so what we're going to do right here is we're just going to pull some of this stuff up. I'm trying to kind of balance this area, so this like belly area, I don't want it to be like half and half where you're getting musculature on the back at like half the rate that you are with this front half. I want it to be kind of like more closer to a 2/3. So I'm just going to kind of pull some of that up to balance it out. Okay, looks like we have like 23 people in here. That's pretty good amount to get started. So let's go ahead and save this guy real quick. Okay, save that. And let's jump into the the feedback stuff. Okay, so our first piece is from Alex, and like I said, I don't have a ton of feedback for this, but in his submission, he said, currently, I'm in the very rough process of filling in the in-betweens of the large curls with breakup and then flyaway curls. Her left side of the head is an example of how I want the entire head to look. Okay, left side is an example. Okay, in particular, flyaways. So far, I have the base layer, large curls, breakup layer, thinner but still curls. I'm currently working on finishing the flyaway layer one before moving on to the flyaway. Okay, her right side of the head will be flat. Blah, blah, blah. I have a hair cap, eyebrows, hairline transition, hairs, and eyelashes to make. And feel good about this so far. I've learned a lot. Ever-evolving project. Okay, for the screenshots and insight, my process for this has been chronologically done in there. Okay, cool. Okay, so yeah, like I said, I don't have a ton of major feedback with this piece. I think overall things are looking really, really good. I like what we have so far. The main feedback that I would say, and we can kind of see this in the real example of hair as well, is mainly just with like how the hair is shading. I do think it's still probably a little bit dark in terms of like just readability. We lose a lot of information in the hair. So like if we look at this hair, for example, you can see there's a lot of like information and light being reflected back. We have highlights through here and just all this information that's being bounced back in terms of like how light the hair is. Whereas like back here, even still, we are getting some of these like nice highlights here to inform how the curls are going. With what we have right now, there is some of that, like right here, but it's more of that red kind of opacity or specular that's bouncing back. So I think what I would try doing is just trying to get a little bit more of like a white tone coming through so that we have a little bit more of a clear indication of where those curls are and how they're reading. So that's just going to be involving playing with like the specularity on the shader and stuff. So I know that you've kind of played with that stuff already, but I would just continue to try and pull that out as much as you can, because ultimately what could end up happening is we lose a lot of the readability of things. And like through here, that's kind of what's happening, is it's like, it's hard to make some of this stuff out. So that's the first thing that I would say. I do think that this section looks pretty successful. I like the like flyaways and all this stuff going on. I would just continue to make sure that you fill it in so that you don't get any of these like holes, and you just really kind of fill in with some thickness to these curls and things like that. That's really the biggest thing that I would recommend for it. Nothing too crazy. It's just those couple of notes, just making sure that it gets filled in. And again, from this side, this is kind of what I'm talking about, but like, I can't really make much out in terms of the detail in this area because the shader is so dark. So just lifting that up a little bit, even if that means like brightening the color of the hair a touch, that might help. I know that Unreal's hair shader is kind of a pain in the butt, but that's the first thing that I would recommend. And again, we just want to make sure from like all angles we're like nixing any of these big like holes in the scalp that are coming through, which if you do run into an issue, which I know that you had mentioned right now, the hair's at 78,000 tries. You're going for maybe 150K budget on it. That's totally fine. I don't think that that's like a problem for a hairstyle like this. You know, it is a lot, but what you could do is if you are running into issues where it's like, okay, I just keep throwing cards at it, you could also like make sure that you have a scalp mesh in here, and you could like darken some of this in the texture as well, so that you are like darkening the scalp so that you're not getting any of that information through. Obviously you do want to fill in those holes, but that's just another way to make sure that the scalp is like, you're not seeing the color of the scalp through a lot of these like big dense portions of the hair. So that's kind of the main feedback. Again, nothing too crazy. Overall, I like the way that it's coming along. The progress is looking nice. So I would just keep doing what you're doing. I like the breakup and the flyaways. I would try, if you can, maybe getting some of these like smaller, thinner flyaways in here, you know, to add a little bit more texture to the hair. That would probably be cool if you can add some of those like thinner ones as well. Good to know. I always feel like I have so many different projects and always hop between them. Yeah, totally fine. Always good to hop between projects if you get bored. Jared shared my work in progress project in the Discord, waiting anxiously. Yeah, I will see which ones I get to. I know that there was a lot of them in there, so I'm probably not going to get to all of them, but we will try and, you know, get through these as fast as we can. So Alex, keep up the good work. Like I said, things are looking good. Just, you know, try and work on that shader, try and fill in those holes and stuff like that. Jared, unfortunately, screenshot loses a lot of the hair sheen, but I appreciate the feedback. Yeah, understandable. If you haven't already, if you do want to like do higher res screenshots, this isn't necessarily for this case, but setting up the movie sequencer or whatever, always better than the high res screenshot. I hate the high res screenshot inside of Unreal. It's a pain in the butt. So I feel like it's usually a good scenario to put in a sequencer at the beginning of the project. That way you can just always have it there and kind of render out your stuff relatively quickly. So okay. So our next one is Christian. So he said, here's my current progress. I'm currently working on the face. Plan is to improve the facial shapes a bit more than improve the wrinkles and skin flow. For the armor, I'm trying to make it mostly clean and then add most of the details and texturing. Any feedback's welcome. I've been looking at it for too long now, so a fresh pair of eyes is welcome. So overall, really cool character. I think that there's, you know, a lot of really cool stuff going on here. I think the proportions are working. The where's my cursor? The like small wrinkles and secondary forms are working. So nice job on that. I don't have a ton of feedback for this guy, mostly because I feel like everything's working pretty well. I don't think you're like overdoing anything. I think that, you know, some of these like secondary forms for your details that you're doing are all going to work really well. I think some of them you might potentially be able to like push them a little bit more. Like maybe like, so you have this shape, this shape, this shape, this shape, and they're all kind of the same size. So you can see that as I'm like circling them, they're all kind of falling in that same size. You might be able to come over to, you know, like right here or something and really kind of take a big chunk out of this area, or like an even bigger chunk out of this area, just so that you are getting a little bit of variety in that size of details. That's really the only thing I would recommend in terms of the detail, is just breaking up that variety. So we don't want to have something that looks like this in terms of size. We want something that, you know, can kind of look like that. There's a little bit more variety to it. So that's the only thing I would say in terms of like the detail. The costume I think looks pretty solid. I would propagate maybe a couple of that like damage and wear and things to some of the pieces like down here on the shins and the boots, you know, maybe put like some dents in here that really indicate like this dude's been kicking people, this dude's been, you know, stomping demons in Doom, whatever it is. You know, I think that is what I would recommend for like the areas down here. You could put a little bit more like frequency of detail, use this as like a rest point, a little bit more frequency of detail, rest point, frequency of detail. And that's just going to allow the character to breathe a little bit more and work pretty well. So that's what I would say in terms of the overall costume. You might want to do a pass as well, since you are putting like secondary shape damage into the outfit. I might do, you know, like a couple of like kind of torn pieces here, kind of tear up a couple of these straps, you know, add some tears into here. So again, just going along with that storytelling that you have up here, which I'm assuming you're probably planning on doing, but just make sure that you propagate that through the character so that it doesn't feel like there's only one piece that has damage and then everything else feels really pristine. Right now, things are feeling pretty pristine throughout, so I would just try and get a little bit of that information in there. I am curious whether you plan on doing the big old shoulder pads. I think that these are pretty cool. I don't think you necessarily have to do them. He already feels pretty bulky, but like silhouette wise, I think that would really kind of like exaggerate this guy's shape. So, you know, check it out, try it out, see if it works. If you don't want to do it, that's totally fine. In terms of conveying the concept though, I think things are looking really cool. I think you did a pretty good job of kind of hitting the overall feel of it. You know, you have a lot of the nice shapes going on. Let's see. Yeah, overall, I like the costume. I think the costume's really, really solid. Just those couple of small notes regarding like the damage and just making sure to kind of propagate it throughout. Now, in terms of the face, really solid on the face. The only thing that I would recommend that's standing out to me is from this 3/4 perspective. Where the heck is my mouse? Okay, there it is. Let's take this and we're going to duplicate this guy real quick. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of nudge this in. So we just want to get a little bit more on this face shape to kind of pull some of those heroic features out just a little bit. So maybe like get some of that, maybe not as much on the jaw, but you can see it's just kind of like pushing it just a little bit. Maybe even same thing with up here on the forehead too, really kind of accentuating that brow bone. So just small little subtle adjustments, and that really kind of like pushes the overall look of him a little bit more, kind of adds some of that angularity and like, oh, I'm really angry, I really want to beat demons up kind of feel that he has going on him, you know. So really subtle stuff with that. The other thing is, again, since this guy, there's two ways that you could take this. The first thing that I would say is you are going for more of that stylized Doom realism. So you could potentially push the symmetry a little bit further, because there is a lot of symmetry going on in the face. So you might be able to like really kind of wonkify his face just a little bit more to like really kind of push that stylization. So, you know, pushing some of these brows up a little bit, making his nose like really broken potentially, you know, adding some of those features in there that break up the symmetry of the face, which maybe you don't want to do. Take that how you will. But again, might just add a little bit of like personality to him. And then same thing with like the ears. I always recommend kind of just, especially with a guy like this, with the cauliflower ear and stuff, he's got that kind of like, I've been beat up look. I've definitely been in the ringer. You know, the cauliflower ear indicates like wrestling or MMA or fighting or something of that nature. So as like pristine and polished and like pretty as he looks, kind of feels contradictory to what that's telling me. So just kind of pushing those things a little bit more, I think will help. The other thing that I would recommend is, so from this right here, I like the scars that we have, but I think that we're not committing fully to them. So like if I was to come back here, you probably would look at this and go, oh wow, he has like a really nice, clean face. You know, he has a couple of wrinkles, a couple of like dimpling in his chin, but like a pretty nice face. But once you kind of zoom in here, it's like, oh, he's got a couple of like little scars. So for me, that feels like we aren't fully committed to it, where like this scar potentially, you could really, you know, mold some of the forms around how that scar is actually impacting the tissue underneath it and the forms underneath it. And same thing with this one. You know, you want that stuff to like stand out and read from this distance. You know, this is how you're probably going to be viewing him in most cases. So you want to make sure that that detail comes across. You can have small scars in here. You know, you could have like your small little scar here. You could even keep this one potentially a little bit smaller, but ensuring that you have something that's like reading from a distance, whether it's taking this guy and like really kind of like burling it up and make it thick and like prominent in how it's like healed on the skin. Stuff like that is going to add a little bit more interest. So again, right now, I think we just want to commit fully to that. Like, this guy's supposed to be fighting demons, you know, he's supposed to be going at it against stuff, getting hit in the face. He probably has scars, but they're not like a demon walked up and was like, ooh, let me scratch your face. You know what I mean? Like, it's someone that's actually trying to do harm to him. So I think that's what I would recommend in terms of the face. Overall, really solid. The piece is really, really solid. A lot of really, really good stuff. I'm excited to see how you handle the texturing and like getting a lot of this like grime and you know, whether you do like paint chipping and things like that. I think once you finish this piece, it's going to be really solid. It's just like those like last 10% on the modeling that I think will take it to the next step. So those are the ones in the secret channel. Let's take a look at the other ones. Okay, so let's copy this guy, open up a new one. We'll take a look at chat here in just a second, see what you guys think. Also, I would love, you know, you guys are more than welcome to talk amongst yourself in the chat. And like, if you guys see things or things that you feel, I would encourage you guys to also provide some input on that as well. And the reason for that is because, you know, not only do I not see everything, but my artistic eye is going to be different than yours. You guys might see things that you're like, oh, well, this feels a little bit off, you know, and getting that information out there, that first impression, I do think is really, really important. Let's see. Hey, Jared, I've purchased a few of your smart materials and wondering if you have any plans to sell materials with weathered fabrics or torn effects. So my latest smart material pack does have the like a couple of tattered clothes smart material anchored stuff in there that you can use. I haven't been working on any smart materials lately just because I've been working on some other stuff, but eventually I would like to continue to grow that library, but I will keep that in mind that that's something that is of interest. Or do you usually create those torn details in ZBrush? That's a good question as well. That really just depends. That mainly depends on kind of how I want to accomplish the final model. So in a lot of cases, I like to do detail sculpturally. So I will put kind of how Christian did his details. I will do kind of like medium to heroic size stuff in the sculpt, and then I will do like more tertiary tears and things like that after the fact in Substance Painter. So that's usually kind of how I handle that stuff. It really just depends on a case-by-case basis and like what the project entails, but a lot of the time I try to put it in the sculpt. So hi Jared, recently discovered CC4, but because I am on Mac OS I can't use it, neither in VM. I want a base mesh I can start/add to it in ZBrush, export and use the pre-animation render in UE. I have no recommendations for that. I have never used Character Creator. So I would say if you're looking for a base mesh, the best place to find one is probably just going on ArtStation and scooping up one from there. Again, I've never used Character Creator, so I don't really know how all of that works. If you are interested in base meshes, I am working on one, so that one should hopefully be ready sometime in the future. So I am working on one to put out to the community, but also I know Jason Hill also has one, which I would recommend as well. Jared, I have trouble seeing how realistic my character is when it's just in ZBrush. Do you think it's worth making an Unreal Clay render to see it better? I've never used it before. You can. Usually if you kind of feel like you're struggling with how your character's looking, what I would recommend doing is two things. One, painting eyes. That always kind of alleviates the dead look that a lot of characters have and gives them a little bit more life towards realism. Also applying poly paint to the character, trying to give some sense of completeness to the character usually helps kind of bridge that gap. Getting in all of the features, whether it be hair, whether it be the eyes, color of the skin, getting all of that stuff in there and represented usually is a good way to kind of understand your character. If you want, you could put it into Unreal to kind of get a better idea of it, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to help too much. It might for you, so I would try it out. I personally don't really do that, but again, that's just for me the way that I bridge that disconnect between what my stuff is looking like with the weird kind of clay ZBrush look and the actual character is by putting color information on it. That piece is coming out amazing. Great work to the artist who sculpted it. Yeah, definitely. Christian did a really solid job with this one. Hi Jared, I'm Alex from Substance and CGMA. I really love the course. It has been very useful. Awesome. Thank you, Major 3D. I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that. And thank you for coming here to hang out. Okay, so let's take a look at this guy. So this is Booma, WIP White Spike Head. Okay, so very interesting concept, very interesting character. There wasn't a concept with it, so I don't know if it's, based off of anything specific. But the first thing that I'm going to call out with this guy is there is a little bit of a lack of form in the model. There is a decent like primary form going on here with like the structure of the skull going on and stuff, and like where the teeth are, and this like kind of like shortened jaw with the exaggerated like corner piece of it, and then the silhouette from up here. But I think that that's kind of where we stopped when it came to solving the form on this piece. There is not really much in terms of the secondary form going on in here to help support the overall sculpt. We kind of bypassed going from our first forms, our primary forms, all the way to our tertiary forms and our detail. So we went to our third stage where we have like all of this like high frequency stuff, and this stuff is cool, but it's kind of detracting from the fact that we don't have the foundation underneath it to really support that. So what I would do is, like in this area for the teeth, I would have like forms that integrate into the skull and kind of provide some indication of how this stuff is working together. Here for the eyeball, for example, there's just a lot of kind of like chattery, scratchy noise that's going on right here. But what we really would want is we would want, a kind of defined eyelid, giving a little bit of a structure. Here's like our tear duct. Here's some of the wrinkles and the eyeball hole that kind of holds everything together. And then we have some of this stuff that's maybe like fat and then it comes out here into this bony structure that is like the orbital zygomatic area that supports all of this, and then this kind of dives into here, and then you have the separation of here, whereas right now we kind of lose a lot of that information, and we don't really have anything that's supporting how this stuff is working. Same thing here with the nose. We have kind of this shape, this like diamond shape, and then you have like the holes here, but there's no form inside of those holes that support like the structure of the nostrils and like this little piece of cartilage that probably separates it, and same thing with right here. So that's what I would recommend doing, is just going through, giving a secondary pass on your stuff. If you are sculpting your primary forms and then jumping to your details, you're missing a step. That's usually one of the biggest things that I see people do, is they jump from primary forms all the way to doing their tertiary details, as opposed to going from your primary forms, breaking those forms down to smaller forms into your secondary forms, breaking those forms down smaller into your tertiary forms, which, I like to do tertiary forms and tertiary details, which in my mind, I kind of categorize those as two separate things. But always try to work through that flow. That will always improve your sculpts. And right now, I think that that's kind of the main stuff that this is missing, is that second layer of grounding and cohesion to having these details exist on top of it. Now, in terms of the details and stuff, the other thing that I would recommend is, right now, all of the details feel like they're the same sort of intensity. There's just a lot of kind of like sharp noise throughout. None of it really feels super cohesive to enhancing the model. It just kind of feels like it's put on top of it just for the sake of being detail. So I would just bring that back a little bit. Think about like, okay, where could there be a lot of detail? Like, what is the material that I'm trying to convey? So potentially like this fleshy stuff here through like the lips and the gums and stuff, that's totally cool. But maybe some of this area is like more bone. So the texture should feel a little bit different and varying from the texture that's down here. Whereas right now, I feel like that texture throughout is feeling contiguous and not differentiating between material. So that's what I would say for this one. But again, overall cool stuff. The color scheming and like the pattern and the symmetry, like this stuff is pretty cool. So I like that. We just want to always work on those secondary forms. Your secondary forms are going to make all the difference in your models. So let's nuke this piece, nuke this one. Let's do a new piece. I went and got In-N-Out after the card show, and I swear every time I eat In-N-Out, it's like eating a freaking gallon of salt, and I'm just thirsty afterwards. I've been thirsty for the last like 3 hours because of it. I've chugged a couple of waters and just can't seem to get my thirst under control. Okay, dang, this is a big old concept. Get this in place. Is just to double check with you guys, is the music still sounding okay and not overpowering things, hopefully? Thanks for answering. I thought baking it after creating details in ZBrush might give a better result, but tearing fabric in ZBrush is okay. So I was planning to just represent it with textures instead. Yeah, I mean you can do both, but it's that's what I would say. And just figure out what works best for you in your pipeline. I do it a specific way just because like I like to get as much control in the final piece as I can, and that's usually like how I'm able to do that. Hey, what's up, Zach? Let's see. Having trouble doing poly paint. Do you know of any courses or tutorials on how to do it? No. Actually, that's not true. Search Chris Costa. He has some stuff on his channel that'll probably be helpful. It's from a movie called, I think it's called the Tomorrow War. The only reason that I know what the Tomorrow War is because I watch Kind of Funny Games most days while I'm working, and I know a couple weeks back they were talking about, oh, it's a great movie, go watch it, and like it's on Amazon, and no one watched it when initially released, and so that is the only reason why I know the movie that you're talking about. Eric, I think the Flip Normals has an interesting breakdown on how to use poly paint on their Thanos gauntlet. Yeah, that might be a good one to check out as well. Let's see. Okay, cool. So the last picture is my reference photo, but I keep getting confused about whether the anatomy and the shape is correct. The more I work on it, the stranger it seems to get. Okay, that is an interesting one. So I can see where we're kind of getting a little bit confused on. So what I would recommend for this piece is there's a couple of things that you could do. The first one is, let's see if I can find it, Animal Atlas of Anatomy, I think is what it's called. Yes. Okay. So if you're interested in doing animal anatomy, this is a book that I would highly recommend. It's called An Atlas of Animal Anatomy. And if you don't want to buy it, totally fine. But you can find a lot of these pictures on here. So let's see if we can find one that might work. Like dogs or big cats or different things like that, maybe horses. I would probably say like a big cat might be the best representation for this. You might be able to mix and match some of those, but what I would do is I would check out some of the images from this book. Like you get a nice turnaround breakdown of the anatomy of different animals, and I would start to kind of sculpt that information onto how the model is looking, because that's kind of the primary way that you convey creatures in your sculpts, is you have an understanding of actual animal anatomy and you kind of rip and pull those pieces and conjoin them together in order for it to work in a sense like this on something that doesn't exist. So I can see that there's a little bit of that. Like right here we have kind of the shoulder blade on like a dog or a cat, and then we have like the tricep heads here, we have some of like the forearm muscles here, we have the bicep and tricep heads here. So there's a lot of that same sort of stuff. I think what I would recommend is right now it looks like this model is definitely too high. So you're sculpting on a mesh that is really, really high density. And so what you're doing and what you're getting is you're getting a lot of these forms that feel very like wobbly and not very solid. So there's two things that I would do. One, I would either turn down the Dynamesh on the model if you want to continue to kind of reform the model in Dynamesh, or I would also run a Z remesh on this. So duplicate it, run a Z remesh. I spelt that wrong. Ignore my spelling. It's terrible. I'm terrible at spelling. But I would run a Z remesh on a second version of this so that you have something a little bit lower, and then I would reproject in, and then I would go to that lowest level of your new mesh and just really kind of focus on defining some of these shapes so that they read really well as shapes. That's really what's going to make all of the difference in understanding kind of what's going on. So sculpting the anatomy without any of this like superficial detail on here is kind of the way that I go about it. Is I get a structure in place, and then once I have like the ribs that are going to exist like right through here, and I have the musculature for like the back legs and all of that stuff, is when I would come in here and start to sculpt these forms that I'm seeing on top of the animal over it. So like right here, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves with that because we don't have that underlying like rib structure to kind of support this stuff yet. And then you need to get some of the other forms in there that are going to support it. So that's the main thing that I would do, is I would just try and simplify it. two ways that you could go about doing that is potentially putting this piece on hold and doing like a dog or a big cat and really studying the anatomy of something like that and getting comfortable with how those shapes work and making sure that they're readable, and then coming back to this piece so that you like have a groundwork and understanding of how this stuff works. And or again, just really working on getting that basic form and anatomy existing under here would really help. So again, I think that that's the biggest thing is, one, the forms are really wobbly, and two, there's an attempt to get the anatomy in place, but I think you're fighting it because the geometry is probably a little bit too high. And you know, there is just some sculpting of things because you're probably just looking at an image of it and you're not understanding the whole picture of what exactly is going on. If you want to look at other things, I would recommend going to like, let me see, Evo. I just looked at this place yesterday. Evo Anatomy, Evolution Anatomy, Evo Anatomy Figures, I think is what it's called, maybe. Oh, Evo Laboratory. This is a good one to like look at different collections of animals, but you can see like different stuff and showing and understanding like the forms and the musculature and how it is actually underneath it. So I would check out sites like this, or what other ones are there? There's a couple of other animal anatomy places that you might be able to check out. Statues. Yeah, so like some of these different things and animal anatomy figures, these ones are really good. But you can really get an understanding of like the musculature and how it looks and how it works. So I would just explore a little bit more into that. Again, I think we're just kind of getting a little too ahead of ourselves by trying to add in like certain forms and details that we don't fully understand that are there. So the more we can simplify it, the better it's going to be for us in the long run. The other thing that I would recommend, I would probably try and get this leg fused into here as well, because once you get everything like attached and fused together, it's going to make it a little bit easier to start to like combine those forms. I know that when I sculpt human anatomy, I usually like start out with a sphere and I like pull the arms out and maybe like put tubes there and kind of sculpt those, but I don't fuse stuff together. And it always creates like this weird, funky disconnect in my brain that's like something feels off, but I can't tell what it is. And it's usually because I haven't like fused everything together yet. So that's what I would recommend for this piece. In terms of the head, same sort of thing. I think that, you know, we're seeing a lot of kind of this like wobbly form where nothing is retaining like a solid structure and mass. So because of that, nothing is actually working super well. And again, I think a main part of why that's happening is, my guess is that you're working in Dynamesh. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But if you're not working on Dynamesh, you're definitely working on the sculpt too high, because that's what's going to create all this like wobbliness. Is when you sculpt on a high topology, you usually start to smooth it, but things don't actually smooth out. So the lower you can go, the more you can like take a form and really kind of round it out, the better that it's going to look. So thank you for reading my comment and for your response. I do have J Hill's base mesh now. Do you know any tools that can rig base meshes quickly for quick animations like walking or posing in Unreal? I want to say that there is rigging. Let's see. There are softwares. I don't remember what they're called anymore. Auto Rig, maybe? Auto Rig Pro, I think is what it's called. No, that's not it. That's in Blender. Advanced rigging, adventure rigging, tools, software. There was one that I knew that I don't remember what it's called now. Quick Rig, maybe. Is that what I just said? I don't remember what I just said. Let's see. Quick Rig. Yeah, that's what I just said. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not the best. AccuRig, is that what it is? That might be what it is. Free auto rigging, AccuRig. Yeah, that looks like it might be an option. I had one of my friends, she recommended a tool, but I don't remember what it's called now. But that might be something that you could use. Like I said, I don't ever rig my characters. You could use like the rigging stuff that's in Maya, but I'm not too fond on rigging my characters just because I'm dumb, and that's over my pay grade. Hey Jared, love your streams. I have a question regarding the CV stuff. I've moved countries after working as a 3D generalist, but so far I wasn't able to find a job in the game industry. Currently I'm working in the kitchen for the last year. Should I put that in my CV or leave it as a blank / free space? Honestly, I don't really know if I have a good answer to that. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to say that you're doing that. You know, like you're working in a kitchen. It's obviously a collaborative environment, which any collaborative experience is always good to have and good to know. And it's probably a high intensity field, you know, like I can only imagine working in a kitchen is probably really stressful on a day to day. So that I don't really know. I don't know how people look at those things. I would say if you've been working as a generalist prior to that, I think it's probably fine to exclude the kitchen stuff if you want to, and just talk about your experience as a generalist and, you know, how that can help you to contribute to a production or a pipeline or whatever. I don't think you need to put the kitchen stuff since, you know, but in terms of like resume, again, I don't know. That is a question that is probably better targeted towards a recruiter or someone that can answer that a little bit more directly, because I don't deal with any of that stuff, so I don't actually know. Stressful collaborative environment, but I am not in the studio, so I'm not sure it is worth it to put it. Yeah, again, I think it just depends. I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, unfortunately. But hopefully that was a little bit helpful. If it wasn't, I apologize. I try to be helpful, but sometimes I don't know what I'm talking about. Actually, a lot of the times I don't know what I'm talking about, but I try to know and try to help, but sometimes I don't. So this next piece is pretty cool looking. This is going to be one of those ones where like I probably won't have a ton of feedback on this one because I think overall looking pretty solid, and also I'm probably not the best in terms of feedback for like hard surface stuff, but you know, I can try and give a little bit of guidance on things. So they said, hi Jared, this is my work in progress robot that I've been working on for 3 months. This is my first hard surface character project, plus I'm learning new workflows, so it's taking a lot more time. I'm almost done with the modeling. All that's left to model is the hands, the head, and the skirt armor. Then I can start retopology. The concept art only has one angle, so I had to design the backside myself. Well, that is always a tough one, designing the backside for yourself. I can say based on these images, I definitely think you killed it. So good job with that. I think that designing stuff and making it look cohesive and good is always a challenge, but based off of first glance, I don't have any feedback on the back because I think it looks pretty solid. I think you did a good job of kind of conveying the look and the feel of the concept and a lot of the information that was on the front side of it. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with like hard surface stuff, but I think overall things look pretty solid. Like the you know, the edges and the bevels and things like that are looking pretty good. You know, I feel like there's a good kind of softness. There might be some of these edges that feel a little bit sharp, but overall I think things look pretty good. Yeah, I think that this one's going to probably be a quick one because I don't have a ton of feedback on this guy. I think we did a really nice job. I think one thing, there are probably a couple of things like silhouette wise that we might be able to like push a little bit further. Where is my mouse? Like the shoulders, we might be able to get a little bit more of an accent like on some of these points and really kind of push the curves just a touch. You can see we're like really getting that like nice flare out here. And obviously this stuff is like all feeling a little bit thicker. That stuff is going to happen when it comes to any type of concept, you know, like when you're translating something into 3D, you can never usually make something look quite as like finessed as a drawing. And I think you did a good job with it, but I do think we might have a little bit of room where we could like potentially like thin this out just a little bit towards the tip so that we get a little bit more of that like sharp point on a silhouette that we're seeing there. Again, not huge sort of deal, but just like small couple of things. I think that this is like block out, but really just trying to make sure that we accentuate some of these like nice little curves I think would be good in that area. I can tell that the hands aren't finished. Let's see. So forearms wise, I think we are like proportionally kind of getting a little bit thicker in some areas, like mainly through kind of this stuff. We're getting a little bit thicker in the forearm. So what that's leading me to think is that like the hand should be a little bit bigger to like kind of balance that out in terms of how thick this is, because like right now this piece is coming pretty far to the knuckles, which in the concept it is, but it feels a little bit more dainty and kind of sharp, and we have this sort of taper on the forearm that's also receding back here. And I think right now we are losing a lot of that. So let me go back real quick. I definitely should be putting this on another layer, and I'm sorry that I'm not, but you can see from like this perspective, we are really losing a lot of that shape that's going on in the forearm, where like all of this is just kind of a little bit chunkier, and we have like this big kind of hole where the hand's coming out, whereas like this is all very elegant in creating kind of like that nice curve to straight, and we get this really kind of nice sort of big to thin feel in the forearm. Whereas on ours, what we're getting right now is just kind of a little bit of a chunky feel from like here to here. We don't have quite as much of that like elegant curve that we probably want to try and bring into it. I like a lot of the curves that we have through here. This one on the front of the knee, more so from this angle, does feel potentially a little bit like the hinge is kind of a little bit weird because of how steep it is. Like we do get a really, really convex curve there. So what I might try doing, and again, take this with a grain of salt. If you like it, that's totally fine. I'm by no means a hard surface expert, but I potentially would just try and like bring this out and bring this back just a little bit for balancing that curve just a little bit, just so it's not quite as drastic. But again, take that as you will. If you like that curve, stick to that curve, make that curve feel loved. I don't know. But it does, right from this perspective, I do feel like it makes the knee kind of look like it potentially could break. But it does look cool. It does look really, really cool, especially like this stuff. I like kind of this sort of thick boot look that you have going on. Let's see. I think the helmet's looking pretty good. I do think we are getting a little bit forward on this plane where, and even just this shape, I know that there's still work in progress area, but this shape is getting a little bit big. So I would probably pull that back just a touch, bring it down just a touch, and also kind of just try and push that starting point of the face back just a little bit. Let's see. Same thing with this guy. Probably bring that down just a touch, maybe like 5 to 10%, so that we aren't getting this at kind of the halfway point of this. So you have half, and then you have the other half. What I would do is just kind of knock this back down to maybe like right about here, maybe. And then that now is a little bit less, balanced. It's more like 2/3 to 1/3. So that just makes it a little bit less even, a little bit more interesting. Yeah, again, I kind of feel like I'm kind of like grasping at straws for a lot of this stuff because overall, I feel like it feels really, really solid. This is definitely better than any hard surface stuff I'm going to do. So, nice job with that. For resumes nowadays, recruiters are using AI to see if keywords match to the job description. Yeah, that is probably true. I can tell you from my experience, recruiters, getting your stuff passed to a recruiter is always going to be the hardest part, especially in terms of like the number of people that apply and for them keyword searching. The biggest thing to know is that, recruiters aren't just looking at 10, 13, 14, 15 applications. In most cases, they're looking at upwards of 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 to 4,000 applications potentially for a position. So you definitely want to make sure that your stuff kind of reads for the job. So I think what Alex said is probably a valid point that I didn't think of. So thank you for that, Alex. You may want to focus on keywords. Best bet as you can do to match the description to get to the top of the pile. Yeah, that is also probably true. I've been thinking of adding a section like inspired 3D modeler, illustrator, etc. in my resume. Adding a section like inspiring 3D modeler to maybe stand out in those AI tools that are searching for those keywords. Yeah, I mean, if you can put, if you're looking at a 3D character position, having the keywords that are in a job description will probably help. So let's look at LinkedIn real quick. Am I not logged in here? I thought I was logged in. Let's look at character artist. Oops. Jobs. I know that Naughty Dog is hiring. Maybe we can look at that one. Character artist, Refractor Games, Naughty Dog. Yeah, we'll look at Naughty Dogs real quick. So on LinkedIn, here is Naughty Dog's application. So what you'll do, work with artists, technical artists, engineers to design, implement, and maintain workflows, create high poly models, UVs, in-game topology and textures to ensure high quality in-game characters that work within technical constraints, monitor the needs of rigging, animation, maintain a clear and constant workflow under an established schedule, work closely with effects, work closely with tools and engineering team, work closely with leads and principals. Yeah, so pretty much those are things that you're going to want to be trying to your best to put into an application or your resume, is saying, I worked at such and such. I worked with artists. I worked with technical artists. I created high poly models, UVs, in-game topology textures to ensure high quality in the game characters that work within technical constraints. You want to make sure that like these kind of things are being said in your resume. Obviously they should be true. So the more that you can like show that on your resume, the better. But like things like that are probably going to help with the AI stuff, whatever it's sifting through your information or whatnot. Like if you look at my resume, pretty much all of my jobs say the same thing on them. If you are curious about resumes, the best thing you could do is you can come to, not everyone does this, but like I actually don't even think it's on mine, but some profiles, if you want to see what people's resumes look like, you can go to their about section and there'll be like a section in here somewhere that'll say what, get their resume or something. And I've gone to people's to see that before. So let's see. Thank you for the feedback. I will try and see what I can do for the forum. Yeah, overall, David, really, really solid work. I think that this is a really cool piece. So I think you did a lot of good stuff with it. I'm excited to see it textured, you know, however you end up doing it. But I think overall, really solid hard surface piece, a lot of cool stuff. It's just like extra little notes that, you know, might be able to push things silhouette wise. One other thing that I would say, again, if silhouette wise, if you can push like this kind of feature from this perspective, I think that would be cool too, because this is a nice little like piece to the silhouette. But again, overall, really solid piece. Definitely better hard surface stuff than I can do, so keep it up. Yeah, use description at the top of your resume that says stuff like you're able to do PBR texturing or topology. This will be a cheat and get the keywords. Yeah, definitely. The math of getting a job today seems impossible to me. I think I'll just focus on building a good portfolio and worry about that later. Yeah, I mean, the best thing is going to be your portfolio, but unfortunately, I think we're at a time where like your first step is always going to be getting into a recruiter, making sure that they see your stuff and like your portfolio. There are obviously some of that stuff that is reliant on AI where they might not ever see your portfolio. It's unfortunate, but you know, the more that you are aware of it and the more that you can take those extra notes, definitely I think improve your chances. Eric, this is great, but if your resume never gets seen, your portfolio never will. As someone who has put in 500 applications when I learned the resume trick, I got 4 interviews in 10 apps after. Yeah. They never saw my portfolio. Yeah, that is a lot of what it is. You know, and that's kind of the unfortunate part, is you just have to get your portfolio into the right people's hands. Until the AI keywords, unless you have connections. Yeah, that is also true. That's crazy in my opinion. I don't think that strategy is smart for them, to be honest, specifically in the art fields. It's not. And obviously the reason that it's not is because there's a lot of talent that probably doesn't get seen. But again, going back to kind of what I said, you also have to remember that, like I said, I wasn't exaggerating when like hundreds of thousands of people apply for these positions, and most of the time, like, you have to find a way to like funnel people down that are actually legitimate for it. Because of those 4,000, I can tell you that probably about 200 of them, maybe 200 of them, maybe I'm wrong, I would have to see these numbers for sure, but maybe 200 of them are actually able or capable of doing the job. So they have to do some filtering in order for them to get down to that point of who they think can do the job. So, you know, when you cut out, say there's 3,000 applications, when you cut out 2,500 of them and you have 500 to look at, that's still a lot of applications to look at. You know what I mean? So it's definitely kind of not the greatest thing in the world. You just always have to be your biggest advocate in, you know, doing the stuff that benefits you and helps you the most. So I agree, it sucks and seems insurmountable and impossible, but recruiters are first line. They aren't artistic. Learned this from Blizzard lead environment artists. Yeah, that is true. The recruiters aren't paying attention. At the end of the day, recruiters pick out people that they think might be good for the studio or the job, but you would be surprised the number of portfolios that I've seen or been handed where they're like, oh, what is this? What about this person? And it's like, this person does not do the type of work that we need. So like, this isn't super helpful. So it's not a great formula to get people in, unfortunately. So maybe applying randomly isn't a good strategy. Maybe reaching out to specific people in a company is better. Is this true, Jared, or is it bothering them? I can tell you it depends who you're reaching out to. I've had tons of people reach out to me and be like, hey, will you put in a referral for me at Santa Monica? And I'm like, I don't know who you are. So no, I'm not going to do that, because like, I've never worked with you. I don't know you, you know, so like, that feels icky. So you have to be careful with that. I would say just like cold reaching out and like asking people for a job or whatever, that's never a good strategy. I think that's a very bad strategy to try and get a job. Maybe it works for some people, but I can tell you in my experience, it doesn't feel good. You know, it kind of feels like, oh, hey, I'm just reaching out to you because I want to use you for something. So I don't usually recommend that. What I do recommend is reaching out to recruiters, being like, hi, my name is Eric. I'm interested in this position. Here are my credentials. I would love to apply, or if you feel like I could potentially be a good fit for this, sending it off. There's nothing wrong with that. I can tell you there is a high probability that they won't respond to you. And unfortunately, don't take that personally. Again, going back to the fact that recruiters are very busy. They have lots and lots of people that are after jobs, and they don't necessarily always have the opportunity to reply to everyone. That's just kind of the reality of it. But, I've added connections to recruiters at different studios and things like that, and they've added me as a connection. And worst you could do is add them as a connection, reach out, be like, hi, great to have you as a connection. I'm a character artist. If you feel that I can suit your studio's needs at any point, please feel free to reach out to me, and then leave it at that. Obviously, that's just kind of planting the seed for a connection. They have you now as a connection. In the future, maybe you post some stuff on your ArtStation, and then you post that on your LinkedIn, and they're like, oh, hey, that was that person that reached out. They're a connection now. I see what they're posting. Let me take a look at it. Oh, wow, this could work. There is that possibility. But yeah, I would say it's kind of hard. Also, another thing that Alex brought up, having connections definitely doesn't hurt you. But that kind of goes back to your intent behind having connections. If you are just reaching out to random people, and being like, hey, give me a job, that is bad. Don't do that. But organically try and meet people. And that's kind of why I have the Discord. That's why I do the streaming, is because it's an opportunity for people like you to potentially interact with other people that are also at a same state or in the industry or whatever. Like Alex, now you know Alex, remember that name. You guys can interact in the future. And maybe at some point, Alex ends up at a studio that you're like, hey, I like X and Y studio. And he's like, oh yeah, I remember Eric. I've seen his work. We've interacted before. And he's like, hey, we have this position open. Do you want to apply? Then he has that inward connection for you. So things like that are beneficial. I have had the pleasure of having met a lot of connections through the industry of great people, and a lot of them are organic. And, I never tried to pry for anything. I never was like, hey, can you get me a job? Can you do this? Can you do that? Whatever. I just was like friends with people. And then those friendships down the line have turned into other opportunities, so you never know what's going to happen. Just making connections organically is the best thing that you can probably do in terms of getting your name out. And a lot of that just involves being active. When you're in chat in here, talking to people, when you're on Discord, responding to people, making yourself known and seen, being on Instagram, even commenting on people's work. But when doing that, what I would recommend from like a social media perspective is make yourself identifiable. So you have your name, Eric, visible on ArtStation or Instagram or Discord. Make sure your name is also visible, because there's certain names that I see on a day-to-day basis that, just kind of go over my head. It's like, I see XYZ up, down, and I'm like, okay, that's a cool name, but I kind of forget it. But there are other people that may have crazy names or whatever, like whatnot. I do see them as recognizable names, but like Alex, for example, Alex has been in my streams for years at this point, so it's like, I know Alex has always been in here. He's always interacted. We kind of have a rapport of we like ran into each other at Lightbox. We could start up a conversation, hang out. I can introduce him to people, things like that. It's all just stuff that you have to kind of be aware of. Just be a normal person, talk to people, interact with people, do it on Discord, do it on Instagram, do it on streams and chats and things like that. As antisocial as a lot of us are, you just kind of have to get over that fact. And we're all weird, nerdy people in here too, just trying to have fun and make like dumb creatures and characters. So the more that we can all be weird people that make creatures together, the better it is in the long run. So that was a long rant tangent about making characters and, you know, trying to make connections. Hopefully it was helpful. I don't know. You know, I hope the stuff I say is helpful. I don't know if it is, but, you know, take it with a grain of salt. But those are from my experiences, things that have helped, things that I think have been beneficial to my career. So, honestly, you got to be genuine and not make these connections just to get work. Yes, that is 100% the truth. That may be the goal, but yeah, not super cool. Yeah, again, everyone is trying to get work, but trying to make a connection and be genuine about it is very different than like I said, I've had people that I've never met. They added me as a connection and were like, hey, can you get me a job? And it's like, no. And I'm probably not going to respond to your message, you know? So yeah, just keep that in mind, when reaching out to people. Just be genuine, be a nice person. Don't be weird. Because a lot of times people in the industry, we just want to work with people that we know and that we can, you know, hang out with, get stuff done when we're crunching on things, when we're trying to get stuff finished, and that we can rely on to get the job done. We don't want to work with people that usually are like creating drama or whatever. And there are some of those people, and unfortunately they may struggle in the long run with their career. So okay, so let's take a look at this guy. He's an old guy. He's an old guy with a hat. I like old guys with hats. Hopefully one day I'm an old guy with a hat. Actually, I'm kind of a younger guy still, and I wear hats all the time. So I definitely think I'm on the right road. Currently sculpting an older male who's going to be a character for a short that I'm working on. He's supposed to be a rugged cowboy during the 1800s. I wanted to go for a bit of a stylization on the forms and stray away from trying to go ultra realistic. Here's a concept I created on how I want him to look, more or less. Okay, cool. That's good to know. In terms of the stylization, I think that there is already a lot of stuff that you hit, you know, the proportions. There's some of, there is like some of these asymmetrical forms in terms of like, why is this not working? Brush. Yeah, there we go. In terms of like the jaggedness of the nose and like some of that, I do think right now that is kind of what we're missing. We have a lot of symmetry still in the face. We have asymmetry in the forms, which is good, but we have asymmetry in a lot of the structure of the face. So if we look at like the ears, these ears are pretty much the same shape. If we look at the mouth, geez, that was a horrible line. I'm really bad at drawing my lines on my Cintiq or on my Intuos. You can see it's a very, very symmetrical line. We have symmetry through here, symmetry through here. We have symmetry through here. So that's kind of what I would recommend with this guy, is I think right now we need to go through and kind of add a pass to give a little bit of what I call wonkification to this guy. So kind of coming in here, potentially like pushing an ear out a little bit, pushing this down, giving him a little bit like of off kilter on the mouth, you know, pushing this down, maybe moving the chin over a little bit, coming here, bringing one of the eyebrows up just a touch, bringing the furrow of the brow down just a little bit, you know, just kind of playing with it just a touch so that there's a little bit more like personality and asymmetry to the forms and the structure of the face. That I think is going to help a lot in terms of like the overall character of things. Now from a secondary form, I think we're headed in a good direction, but I do think that there is kind of a little bit to be desired in certain areas. I like the folds and the wrinkles that we have going on here, like on the bags and stuff. I think that stuff looks pretty good, but we have like a couple of the forms up here, which all of them just kind of feel like they're just drawn onto the model. They don't really feel like there is much interacting with the structure that's underneath it. And what I would expect to see, and we have it here in the concepts, you know, you have like these, you have these like wrinkles and these lines. What I would expect to have happen is like a little bit more form indicating what's going on. So like kind of the bulbousness of like the bone that's underneath here, and then the separation into like the skull. You have like this little ball sort of facing skull shape thing. Sorry, I feel like I'm just babbling right now, but you have kind of this like sphere form on the front of the forehead. So creating a little bit more of that separation between those secondary forms, I think would really help this guy out. Same thing with the nose. I might like come in here and like, I like the primary forms and stuff, but I might try and like chisel some of these planes out just a little bit to give them a little bit more character. And a good thing you could reference for this is going to be like Dishonored sculpts. Honored are probably like a good kind of reference point for what you might be able to go after here. So like this guy's a pretty good example. So we'll take this and we will come back here. I feel like this was like a style that everyone did for a really, really long time when I was in college. And like everyone was like after this type of style for their characters. And then it disappeared and people don't do it anymore. And I kind of miss it because this, I think, this game had some like really great stylization. Okay, so yeah, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Like there's these like volumes here where we're getting some indication of like form and plane change on the model. You get some of these like nice planes here, and then that drops off into a plane here. Same thing with right here. You have like a plane change, sharp line, plane change, and then this is like a little bit more rounded. So trying to find some of that stuff I think will really help you as well. So like right here you can see all of this form is just feeling very rounded. Same with this form. Same with this form. So all of your forms are feeling very rounded. There's not any like harsh lines or plane changes. And I think getting some of those in your secondary forms will really kind of help you to push the look of this character a little bit further, especially with like how grumpy he is. That's something that you can lean into. Getting some of those like chiseled lines in here will really kind of help emphasize some of that character that he has. So that's kind of the main feedback. Overall, you know, there's a lot of cool personality and character in here, but the more that you could kind of like push some of those sharp lines, some of those angle changes, and some of those like really kind of sharp volumes that aren't just all rounded, but have like some sense of plane change on them, that will help in the long run for this guy. So that's what I would suggest. Let's see, we have a couple more pieces in here. Let's see, how long have we been going? An hour and a half? We've been going for a while. Let's see, I'm taking notes. Yeah, I was over at PlayStation a couple of years ago and someone didn't know on LinkedIn was like, can you get me a job? Or at ZeniMax previous job, and we weren't even connected. Yeah, I mean that like I said happens to me. I have people come out of the woodworks and that send stuff over and I'm like, I have no clue who you are. And that always feels a little bit icky when they're like, hey, give me a job. And it's like, I am a person, you know, like maybe if you were my friend and I knew you and I'd worked with you, cool. But most of the time it's like, I can't vouch for someone that I've never worked with or don't know who they are, you know. Thank you so much for your feedback. It helps so much on giving me some directionality. I agree about the symmetry. I have been looking at Dishonored sculpts and draw some inspiration. Yeah, like I said, I think it's headed in a good direction. I think what would really help with this piece is just going to be getting some of those plane changes. So really just look at like where planes on their sculpts are starting to like terminate and change direction. And I think that that will be really, really helpful for you, because you can see like even on the eyes, there's like these planes. There's a plane here. There's this kind of plane. So they really have that solid change in form. And so what could really help with this piece is like getting your damn standard and just like drawing on some of these edges and like kind of just pulling it out so that you get a little bit of that roundness, and then like polishing aside, you know, that I think would really help. Speaking of dishonored sculpts, I feel like I should do something similar to this, because like I said, I always like this stuff, but I haven't sculpted faces in a little bit. Will this be posted for us to rewatch after the stream? Yes, this will be in the live section. So this one will be free for everyone to take a look at after the fact. I always try to keep the portfolio reviews and work in progress review ones up on the channel so that everyone can watch after the fact if they're interested. I'm starting to hit that point, ladies and gentlemen, where my voice is getting raspy. Put on the music and I'm still getting raspy, and it's because I just don't shut up. Okay. Ooh, this one's scary. Very spooky. Does this one look like anyone's grandparent, anyone's grandma? Hopefully not. Grandmas aren't supposed to be scary. My grandma's not scary. She definitely does not look like this. I look forward to your work. If you create something similar, I know it'll be killer. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, would be fun. I have, like I said, haven't done anything like that in a really long time. I actually, fun fact, while we're talking about it, let's take a look at it real quick. ZBrush, CGMA, cinematic, no, character casting. I think this is it. No, that's not it. That is also not it. So one of these might be, nope, that's not it. We're gonna find it. We're gonna take a little detour and jump down memory lane here for a second. Nope, that's also not it. Where the heck is it? Is this it? Don't think this is gonna be it. Oh yeah, this is it. Okay, and which you can see, dang, them proportions are bad. This was when I'm pretty sure that this is it. This was when I was at CGMA. And I want to say that the assignment was do a dishonored head sculpt, which maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this wasn't that one, because I feel like I didn't adhere to that at all. Well, I'm missing a couple of weeks in here. Let's look at week 7. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, yeah, here it is. Here it is. Yeah, see, there was my attempt at a dishonored sculpt. There it was. This is a long old time ago. These meshes, why do they look so janky? Color fill object. I mean, I guess it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's definitely not great. Yeah, maybe I should take this guy and go back and finish it and make him look all nice and pretty and updated from how many years since I did that. It's been a long freaking time. That was done in 2016, ladies and gentlemen. 2016. It was a long freaking time ago. That was almost 10 years ago since I did that piece. And it looked like hot doo-doo. Actually, it didn't look horrible, but it definitely didn't look good. Okay, so we got lots of pictures for this next one. All right, let's see. I've been working on this character for the past 2 months as part of my graduation project, and it is also my first piece that went through the entire pipeline. I've attached images from ZBrush, Painter, and Marmoset. I'm kind of confused about the textures being flat, especially the skin. I wanted the character to look more dead and sick, and that's why I went with the purplish color of the skin, not sticking fully to the concept. Thanks in advance for the feedback. Also, could you point out my biggest flaw and what I should work on most? Okay, so yeah, let's talk about a couple of things. We'll talk about the sculpt, then we'll talk about the textures, and then we will talk about the renders. So in terms of the sculpt, I think that there is definitely a lot of good stuff going on here. I think one thing that we're kind of missing in terms of like the details on the face is there is like a level of pores and frequency on things, but I do feel like we're kind of missing some stuff to it. So I feel like the texture feels a little bit off to me. Also, like the lips, we don't really have any of the detail that I would expect here on them. You might have it, but it does feel like it's a little bit soft and not really standing out. So that's kind of what I would recommend with that is the pores feel like we might be missing something on them. Which I think once we get to here, this looks okay. So maybe it's not too bad. But I think what potentially could be the issue is what we're seeing here is we like have some good definition of the forms. You know, you have some good structure in there, but I think we are missing kind of what I call like the grounding pass. And for this character, I think is going to be important. And what that usually consists of is like providing some breakup to the surface before we have the pore details. That is going to be like, you know, additional noise to add a regularity to our surface. All of our forms do feel really, really perfect, and that's good, but I do think we just want to get a little bit of extra oomph to the surface to like kind of break that up just a little bit more. So face wise, that's really what I would recommend, but overall I think it's holding up pretty well. The hands look pretty cool. I like those. The sculpted this stuff looks pretty good. The only thing that I would recommend with it is right now there is just kind of all these lines that are all flowing into one direction. So what is happening here is it kind of loses a little bit of the dimensionality and depth to it. So what I would recommend doing is getting like a couple of layers in here. Like you have the initial kind of like base layer down here where like all this stuff is flowing and dripping, but then you have like something that's kind of like built up a little bit more. So and you're seeing that kind of here where you have like your initial layer, so your base, and then you kind of have a second shape here, another secondary shape here, another secondary shape here. And so you can see we're getting like some smaller shapes in this big triangular shape. So the more that we can do stuff like that, the more it's going to create a little bit more depth and a little bit more interest, as opposed to if we just kind of put all the dripping lines all flowing in one direction. So that's what I would say with that. In terms of the costume, I think things look pretty good, but they are probably a little bit too pristine. We're missing like any kind of secondary form on this guy. All we have is just this little strap, which is cool, but we don't have any like of the forms of like the wrinkles, the major main wrinkles that are created from like that draping cloth. We have a little bit of it here, which is good, but we want to probably like make sure that we kind of accentuate that a little bit more. Also with this one, like you can tell on this character, there's a lot of these like secondary holes that are being created from like burn marks and things like that. I would try and capture some of that, especially on the edges, you know, kind of coming up here and tearing some of those holes in there, or adding that as a secondary detail to the model so that it just makes the piece feel a little bit more complete. Right now, there's a lot of these elements that feel a little bit unfinished, and part of that is because there's not like those secondary shapes. In terms of like the tertiary detail for cloth, that's not a real word, for cloth and fabric, I can do those one of two ways. One, you could do it inside of Substance Painter and, you know, get your texture detail in there with like your fabric weave, which sometimes works, but you're limited by your texture resolution. Or you could use like a detail normal map to get like your tile detail. You know, you have your texture that looks like this, and you can essentially be tiling it in the shader times 400 or however many times you need to tile it in order to retain that detail, that crispness, that sharpness, and really make sure that that holds up. Which it looks from right here, it looks like we might be succumbing to some of that resolution issue. Also, I am not a huge fan of this sort of look on textures, kind of like using the alpha, and like you can see right here, we're seeing inside of the model. That's kind of one of the big cons that comes with trying to do like holes and stuff like that in the textures. So what I usually do is, again, in the sculpt, I would sculpt, you know, some of these like little burn marks and things like that. I would go into the model and like kind of tear this area up in the high poly so that I'm not like worrying about like these inner penetrating holes that I can see inside of. So those aren't really beneficial in my opinion to do inside of the texture. So one thing I will say is, based on this hand, doesn't look like there is a normal map on it or any detail coming through, because like there's a lot of detail on here like in terms of forms, but it looks kind of like we've lost that. So, and this is in the texture painting. I don't, it looks like it's there in the render, so just kidding, disregard that. In terms of the textures, so right now I think that we're doing two things. The main thing is you pushed the color of the face to purple. So what that's doing is you're picking a darker color and you are now putting the color of this face as less important in the overall scheme of the character. So now, because the character's face is like purple, that gets pushed to the background, and then the candle wax is a brighter value. So if we like click and sample this, which this is being influenced by light, but you can see the value of the color is going to be up towards this range. So because of that, this now is where my eye gets drawn to, and not this area, which is kind of a problem. We want the viewer's eye to go to this area. That's the most important area. That's where we want the viewer to be looking. And right now, because we pushed the value back, and again, you said that you went with more purple, this color of skin was intentional. Because if we look at the concept from back here, what you can notice is that we still have our attention drawn to this point, because that is the brightest point of value, met with the darker contrast of the blue of the hat and the dark contrast of this like dirty brown kind of waxy color. So I would recommend not pushing the color of the skin quite as dark. There is a little bit of like brighter pigmentation up right here, but I would try and, you know, make sure that we don't make the head too dark. I would push the value of this down so that's not like pulling attention quite as much. And then on top of it, what we're seeing is, you can see in the render, the face is really, really dark and really, really purple. So we want to kind of counteract that and make sure that that isn't the, like, how our concept or our character is being perceived in terms of like the value structure. We want our eyes to go right here. So I would brighten that skin up a little bit just to make sure that that happens, and then just balancing all of the other colors. So if we were to, you know, start sampling colors on this character, you can see that this is kind of a mid-range, this is a darker range, this is also a darker range, and then this is going to be more towards the high range of our value. So we're getting a lot of stuff down in this area, but then our face is up here, and that's going to create contrast that's going to draw our eye to that section of the character. So in terms of texturing, that's what I would recommend. Now in terms of the skin, I do have some feedback on that in the rendering and as to why it's looking the way that it is. Okay, so like I said, a big part of it is going to be the color. Things are feeling pretty dark, and you said purplish color, the concept. The textures look flat. So I don't know if the textures necessarily look flat as much as I would say it feels like there is a lack of, there might be, but it feels like there's like a lack of subsurface going on. It feels a little bit plasticky from this range, especially like with the highlights right here. We don't have any of that like soft, warm glow that you see from your subsurface scattering. So I would make sure that you have your subsurface scattering on, make sure that you have your scale set up correctly so that wherever you're rendering, which from this picture and just this little tab, my first thought is you're rendering in Marmoset. I could be wrong on that, but that's just my first guess. So if you're rendering inside of Marmoset, make sure that your scale is set up correctly. So to do that, what I recommend doing is giving me a second first. Come over here to this guy and then show scale reference. And then when you do that, why is this not working? Okay, there we go. You're gonna zoom out and you want to make sure that your head is the same size as this guy's head. The reason for that is because subsurface scattering is calculated based on a specific measurement. If your character's head is 3 times as big as this, you're going to need to accommodate for that in your subsurface scattering calculation. If your head is a fraction of it, like the size of a pea, you're going to notice that your character's head, when you put subsurface scattering on it, is going to glow like a jelly bean. Like it's going to just freaking glow like the sun. So you want to make sure that that is set up properly, and that will help with kind of the overall feel of your skin. The other thing is, if you are curious, I do have a YouTube video that I've kind of talked about this stuff before that I would check out. That might be helpful for setting up your skin inside of Marmoset. So let's go to, let's see, where is it? This series of videos that I did a while back. These ones, so this one, how to make a skin shader for game characters. This one is inside Marmoset, and this also breaks down the maps that are needed in order for your character's skin to feel a little bit better. Skin is really tricky because you're having to dial in your subsurface scattering, you're having to dial in your glossiness, your roughness values, but you're also having to manage a secondary specular lobe. Skin has like a primary specular, and it also has tighter highlights, which it looks like specular wise, like there is definitely some stuff going on, which is good, but you also need to like introduce cavities to reduce the specularity in your pores. That usually makes a little bit of a difference, and then also using like a detail normal map in order to break up your highlights even more to produce a little bit more high frequency detail. So those are kind of the main notes that I have for this piece. Okay, we still got a couple left. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make them through all of them because we're going on 2 hours, guys, and I'm getting tired now. But I might do like one more, and then am I gonna do one more? Finished the yeah, I think I'll do one more, and then I think I'm probably gonna stop with the feedback because I'm tired. It's a lot of thinking, a lot of putting my brain power on, and then I might just sculpt for a little bit and we can just hang out and talk some more. So as usual, if you guys have questions, if things don't make sense or whatever, please feel free to let me know, and I'm happy to keep chatting about it. Okay, let's see. I feel like I need to go get another water because I'm thirsty. Get these ones closed. This is a cool concept, cool little character. Let's see, what does this GIF look like? Okay. Yeah, I don't think I need to put the GIF on. Hey Jared, I'm pretty much finished. I finished up the main and secondary masks of the costume, and I'd love to get your feedback before I move on to the next stages. For the cape, I'm planning on making 2 versions. This one's the one that leaves the shoulders uncovered. Also curious what you think about the face. By the way, how long does a stage like this usually take? It took me about 5 weeks. So let's talk about that real quick. So in terms of what you have here, it depends. So I have most of the time made characters, and they usually take, like in production, it varies, but I would say most of the time we have about 4 weeks for the high poly. That's kind of the general rule of thumb on terms of time that we get. Some characters take a little bit longer, some are a little bit quicker. Just kind of depends on a case-by-case basis. But I would usually say about 4 weeks for the high poly is a pretty good estimate in terms of how long you should take to get your like final high poly done. So that's a good time frame to kind of aim for. In terms of what you have here, though, I think overall looks really cool. Looks really solid. I like the head. I think on first glance, the first person that I kind of think of is like a one of the Olsen's sister. Is it Elizabeth Olsen, the one Scarlet Witch? Is that who it is? That's kind of who I think of when I look at the face, which I feel like looks cool, looks good. In terms of the overall character, I think, looks really solid. I like how the costume is looking. I do have a couple of notes that I would call out, and the first one is going to just be like the marvelous designerness of things. And it's going to primarily be with these pieces right here. So let's change this to red real quick. So right now we have kind of these wrinkles that are like kind of clinging to the body. They look a little bit weird. Usually in production, we're not going to want to have like wrinkles that are like clinging to the body and creating kind of this natural drape feeling, because this to me indicates that that there was a sim done. So like it indicates to me that like this is how the fabric looked when it was dropped down and laid on top of the arm. What we want to do in like a T pose is we usually want to give some indication of like a more neutral pose to the arms and how that drapery is going to relax over the arm. The reason for that is because most cases when you see a character, you're going to be seeing a character with his or her arms down to their side. So if you end up having like a lot of this like crinkly stuff, it kind of feels a little bit out of place and not correct to what we're witnessing and seeing. And that's the first thing that I would say I would notice when looking at this character is once you put the arms down, it's going to feel potentially, maybe do a couple of tests with it, but like potentially it's going to kind of feel like it was more simmed than like that's the natural pose of how the cloth should be existing. It's usually the same case when it comes to like cloth on the knees as well. So like say you have your knee, here's the front of your knee, here's the back of your knee. Usually when people do sims, they get like a lot of this like wrinkly stuff and wrinkle bunch up around the knee area, and 99% of the time what you'll see is we will come in and reduce that and soften that out, because you don't want an area of like bunching fabric on the knee on the front side, because that area is going to be where like the cloth should be stretching. So we usually nuke a lot of that stuff and leave like the fabric kind of bending and crunching back here on the back side of the leg. So that's the one main thing that I would say. Other than that, the rest of the fabric looks really, really solid. I like, all the detail that we have through here. I like the overlapping of this stuff. With this stuff, I would say the only thing that kind of stands out to me is everything kind of just follows this volume. So what I would try and do is just get a little bit more kind of like break to the silhouette somehow, so that we can indicate that there's a little bit of bunching or overlap on all of this stuff, so that it breaks up the form just a little bit more. That's the only thing that I would say. Same thing with up here. If you could provide like a little bit of indication that there's some thickness to this, you know, maybe like putting in kind of like bunching there, something that would help as well in terms of like breaking up the silhouette so that it doesn't all just feel like one cohesive long shape. Let's see. Hood looks good. All the little details look really cool. Let's actually look at the concept. I haven't like fully looked at the concept. Oh, okay. So chainmail. This is a good point. That's what I thought that this was going to be. This, in my opinion, it doesn't really hold up. And the reason for that is because like I would expect, in my opinion, I would actually make this like legitimate geometry. And so there are different ways to do this relatively quickly. So let's see, YouTube, you can do this with like nano mesh, I think, chainmail, ZBrush. You can do this relatively quickly. So if you like go search this on YouTube, you can create something pretty quickly, pretty fast, just by using like nano mesh or one of those micro mesh or one of those different tools inside of ZBrush. I would check those out, and you can make something that looks really good really quickly. Obviously in the low poly, yes, I would have, you know, a piece of geometry that's essentially going to look like this all the way over it and encapsulating this. But what you could do is you have that single sheet, and what you could do is you could have like a couple of extra rings that you will put down here so that those ones will have actual three-dimensionality to them, so it feels like there is like these broken off pieces of chainmail on the bottom, but you're creating like shadows and things like that because of it. So that's what I would recommend. And then obviously you want to like put something under here. You might be able to like sculpt little bits of detail to indicate that there's like some fabric on the shirt that's under the chainmail, depending. But also one thing that I would say is right now, this chainmail potentially, yeah, I guess it's fine. It does look like it might, like, the rings might be a little bit too thick, because there are these like pretty decent holes in here. So that's one thing that I would recommend, is just being careful with like how big of a hole that you have in between your chainmail, because, you know, chainmail's meant to prevent stuff from getting through, and right now feels like you might be able to get an arrow through that, which probably not, but just something to keep in mind. The feet and all the details, those look pretty cool. I like the wrinkles and stuff that we have going on here. The only other thing that I would recommend is potentially just tattering some of this stuff up a little bit more. Like if you look at the feet here, you kind of have like some of these tears. This person obviously walks around a lot. Like this stuff isn't going to be pristine and like super well kept. So the more that you can, you know, illustrate that in the model, which I see that there's a hint of it, but again, like look at how small that is in relation to the form and how close I'm having to zoom in order to see that. So I would recommend just coming in here, you know, taking a little bit more heroic gashes out of stuff like that. Even in areas like this, probably doing the same thing, just kind of like tearing stuff up a little bit, adding like little pieces of damage and tear on the edge of some of this stuff. Same thing with like the cloth. I would probably do that here as well. So yeah, that's kind of the main feedback. Overall, really solid piece. I like how it's looking. I think you did a really good job of conveying like the emotion, the feeling, the like character, especially like anatomically wise. I think the proportions look good. It feels very like fantasy, whimsical, you know, so really nice job with that. Let's see, is there anything else I could throw some feedback on here for? No, I think overall looks really solid. I like how it looks. So, nice job with that. Did a really good job with it. What did we see in the comments section? If you're a junior, I've seen that for an asset would like be 4 to 6 weeks, not hero assets, but again, that's been my experience. Yeah, so it really depends. I mean, hero assets can vary. It depends what the hero is. Usually, like a main character for like a story-driven experience, you're probably going to be working on that character from like the start of the project all the way to the end of the project. But for like creatures, monsters, secondary characters, things that aren't like the main character, yeah, you're probably going to have about 4 to 6 weeks, 4 to 7 weeks on the high poly usually. And then the way that the rest of the schedule is broken down is low poly can be, I don't know, a week to 2 weeks potentially, depending on how complex it is. UVs usually like no more than a week from my experience. I don't think you usually need too much more time than that. And then texturing is usually like 1 to 2 weeks. Hair, that's another beast. I've had a week, I've had 2 weeks, I've had 3 weeks. It really kind of just depends when it comes to hair. But, you know, it is what it is. Each character is a little bit different. But I would say trying to get your stuff done in about 4 to 6 weeks is a good kind of place to be at when it comes to this stuff. So, Jared, sorry if I'm asking too much, but can you take a quick look at my work in progress? Just a minute. Saying whether it's good or bad is enough. Sorry to bother. Yeah, throw that in there, and I'll take a quick peek at it, and then I think we're gonna wrap up the stream. And because my dog is, she's literally sitting next to me staring at me like, why are you still working? Oh, and now she's whining. So yeah, I'm gonna do a quick. You got to be quick. Gotta be real fast, because she's getting impatient. So I don't know if she needs to go out or what, but and also just let me know if you're putting it in the general chat or the secret chat. Just let me know. Already there. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it. Let's see. Okay. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I was texting my wife back. It's funny that you're like, yeah, my name's Eric. You've been saying it all these times, and you just overlooked it. Sorry. I apologize. When I see your full name on the YouTube chat, I'm like, oh, yeah. But then I see your name in here. I'm like, oh, well, that's a different Eric. Okay, so let's see. This is a very crazy looking concept. Oh, yep. I don't know if you guys can hear her. She's getting angry. My dog is getting feisty. She's like, can you please like play with me and stop working? That would be nice. Okay, so we'll do this one real quick. Let's take a look. Let's see. Yeah, overall, I think pretty solid. The two things that I would recommend, one would be I would try and get a little bit more of like an interesting gesture or pose in the character. Like this feels really, really stiff and really like flat and boring. Which obviously it's an A pose, but I think the more that you can make this character just like a little bit more relaxed, I think the better that it'll feel. In terms of proportions, I think things are looking pretty good. We might be getting a little wide on the hips because it feels like we have a really kind of like bulbous down here, which, you know, the wide hips aren't bad, but it does feel a little bit like exaggerated. And especially with like how round all this stuff is, I think the more that we can kind of like provide a little bit more angularity to things, the better. And then the other thing that I was going to recommend is, I mean, I don't know if you need to do this, but potentially like thickening up some of these, because like if we look at it from this perspective, we don't really have much in terms of like the silhouette getting broken, whereas over here, even in the concept, we do have like some clear indications of where the concept is like breaking those points on the silhouette. So just trying to kind of accentuate that a little bit more so that we don't have like these continuous lines without like a clear distinction on where these plates are breaking up. I think the more that you can kind of illustrate the thickness of the plates, the better. Which, yeah, it might be a little bit of an over exaggeration, but I think when it comes to metal and like plating like that, I usually feel like it kind of reads a little bit better and more interesting. And then the other thing, again, kind of going over like the stiffness, I would just get a little bit of like relaxedness into the arms. And then potentially also a little bit more relaxed into the legs. So like maybe just kind of splay those out a little bit more and just kind of relax the arms a little bit so they're not quite as stiff. And just as like a base pose, I think that that might like make things read just a little bit more relaxed, a little bit nicer. And then also the other thing too is I think, you know, we do have a little bit less of a like rounded bulbous shape in here. We have kind of this nice arch that drops off. So reducing kind of like the shoulder pad feel here and just making sure that it like naturally kind of flows off into the cape, I think will really help. So that's kind of my main feedback with it. Again, I know that one was quick, but I think it's headed in a good direction. Just a couple of small notes. But yeah, that is what I got to say. Great work, everyone. Lots of really cool stuff. A lot of, improvement in people's work that I've looked at before, and just a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool projects that everyone's working on. It's cool to see everyone's like working on like drastically different things from this to like the Doom piece and the hard surface stuff. So keep up the great work. I thank you guys for coming and spending a Saturday morning, night, whatever time of day it is with me and chatting, asking questions and stuff. With that said, I'm going to call this stream, but I am going to stream probably tomorrow morning as well. I'll work on some sculpting for probably this guy again for a little bit. Not sure if I'll work on this or the anatomy, but if you're interested, I'm going to sculpt in the morning for maybe an hour and a half, and see how far we can get this guy, because we're already making some good progress on it. I might sculpt a little bit more tonight. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe I'll go watch a movie. I don't know. It's already almost 7:00. Holy crap. Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys again. I appreciate it. Thank you for stopping by. And hopefully I see you guys again tomorrow. Bye guys.